I've had a couple of requests to do a video or a series of videos on granulation, so that's what I'm going to do now. I haven't done any videos for some time, so I'm having to try and remember what I have covered and what I haven't. So I shall, if I repeat things that I've already said, you'll have to bear with me, but hopefully it'll be reasonably useful. This will be a very basic introduction. But it might prove useful to some people. Okay, let's start with an empty patch. Oh, hello, sorry. No. I'm going to make use of something a little bit later on that we've already covered, but for the time being we'll start off with a very basic means of generating a grain. But in order to make a grain, I'm going to be capturing fragments of an existing sound file. So first of all we need to load up a sound file, and we also need to be able to visualize it. So I'm going to be using the waveform editor objects. So okay, first of all make a buffer. And I'm going to call it sound. And if I haven't already shown you, a way of loading into the buffer easily and quickly is to use the drop file object. So the drop file object, obviously you can find it in the palette of objects, but you can also write it into the object name and it will pop up like that, and I'm going to use that to replace the existing contents of buffer, which of course are non-existent at the moment. Oops, sorry, a bit rusty doing this stuff. Right, okay. And as I say, we need to be able to visualize what we've got in there, so waveform object. And what I shall be using for these grains will be stereo, so I'll need two of those, like that. And in order to, for those objects to refer to the buffer that we've got there, you might remember I need a, and then I need to put as a second argument there, I need to put in the number of the channel that I want it to refer to. So I'll do that. And I will tell those waveform objects to refer to those two channels of the buffer as soon as my patch opens, and then whenever I load a new sound, it will update automatically. I'm a little bit croaky today. So let's find a sound, just make sure that's working. Go into the grains folder and drag in, I've got a sound which I just happen to fancy using, which is spoon drops, and that's loaded in just fine. Right, so how would we get a grain out of that sound file? Well, we could use two objects to read sound from the buffer. We've already covered both of them. I could use a groove object, but I'm actually not going to. I'll explain in a bit more detail perhaps a little later on why I want to use the play object rather than the groove object. So let's write that in. Get it to refer to sound, and obviously it's got two channels in it. But one of the reasons, in a nutshell, is because I want to be able to do enveloping of the grains, which groove will do, but I've found that the play object, or the means by which I'm triggering the play object, allows me to do that a little bit more efficiently. and then secondly because I think the play object is a bit more efficient anyway. But the groove object would work too. I've just decided to use the play object. So how would we get that to play a grain? Well, we would run it through line object to get line to read through play, and then tell line where to read from and to. So let's say I wanted it to play the first 200 milliseconds of that file, then I would go 0 to 200 milliseconds over 200 milliseconds, and it will do so. And then I can send the results of that straight out to an easy DAC. Like that, and then hopefully that will work, as indeed it does. And if I wanted to read from a different point within that file, I could do so just by setting different values into here. So I would say perhaps read from 200 to 400 milliseconds. Oops. Again over 200 milliseconds, and it will play back at the pitch at which it was recorded, like that. So that's fine. But well, let's move on a little bit and consider what kinds of parameters we want to be able to control in terms of our kind of granulation process. Well, I'll scribble them in on the comment boxes so that we can have them sitting there to remind us what we want. First of all, we're going to want to choose the length of each grain. So we'll put in grain length, and we're going to want to be able to choose from where in the file that grain is taken from. So grain position. We would also, when we are triggering several of these grains at once, we'd want to be able to choose how densely they're being played back. So you could say that's density, or you could say that's interval between triggered grains. So obviously the longer the interval, the lower the density. So we will put that one in. And then finally, perhaps, we would want to be able to choose, or we'd be able to transpose. Oops. As well. So some things we might be able to change or to control. All right. Well, I'm going to stop there, I think.